It's hard to believe that in this world there are people who spend almost their entire lives on water. On the edges of distant archipelagos, where maps fade into waves and the sky meets the sea, there are no roads, no borders, only water, wind, and tide. The ocean is the only constant, and even that can turn without warning. And yet, this is home. For the sea peoples of Southeast Asia, the boat is cradle, shelter, and compass. They fish by moonlight, dive without tanks, and read the currents like scripture. Storms don't scare them, they speak their language. Land is just a pause. The sea is where life truly begins. This is the story of the ocean tribes drifting, enduring, and forever tied to the pulse of the tide. Sama Bajao. In the warm heart of maritime Southeast Asia, where the sea shimmers like glass beneath skies of endless blue, the Sama Bajao people have carved out a life not on land, but upon the living ocean. For centuries, they have drifted across the waves in wooden houseboats, never tethered to one shore, answering only to the wind, the tide, and the silent pull of the horizon. Imagine a world where land is temporary, but water is forever. Where children are rocked to sleep by the sway of the waves, and every sunrise is framed by the curve of the sea. The Sama Bajao have no fixed homeland, yet they belong everywhere the current flows. To them, islands are resting places, not roots. Their roots are the ocean itself. In these floating villages, life moves with rhythm older than nations. Songs are sung not for crowds, but for the sea. Elders speak in stories carried by salt and spray, passing down knowledge not through books, but through memory. 1,000 years of maritime wisdom held in the calloused hands of hurl divers, seaweed farmers, and fishers who read the ocean like a sacred text. And yet, their freedom is no longer secure. As borders tighten and coastlines shrink under modern expansion, the Sama Bajao find themselves cast adrift in more ways than one. Stateless in the eyes of governments, they live between worlds revered as symbols of resilience, yet too often forgotten by the very lands they fish beside. Their story is not one of the past. It is still unfolding, wave by wave. Bajao Laut. Beneath the blazing sun and coral-rich waters of the Sulu and Celebes seas lives a people whose relationship with the ocean reaches almost mythical proportions. The Bajao Laut, a distinct branch of the Sama Bajao, are not simply sea dwellers, they are sea beings. Born on boats, raised by waves, they possess a mastery of the ocean so intimate it defies modern understanding. Here, childhood is an apprenticeship in survival. Before they can walk, Bajao Laut children can swim. Before they speak in full sentences, they can dive. Their playground is the reef, their school the tide. And as they grow, they inherit not just skills, but a calling, a life lived in symbiosis with the sea. What science only recently confirmed, the Bajao Laut have always known in their bones, that the human body can adapt to the sea. Studies reveal their spleens are larger than average, granting them the ability to hold their breath and dive deep for minutes at a time. But this isn't evolution in a lab, it's adaptation through generations of daily immersion, of trusting breath and silence beneath the surface. Fishing is not work, it's communion. They dive without tanks or fins, hunting octopus with handmade spears, navigating reefs with the precision of sonar. Each movement is part instinct, part tradition. Passed from father to son, mother to daughter, in a language made of currents and memory. But even these masters of the sea are facing storms they cannot outswim. Displacement, political exclusion, and vanishing fish stocks threaten their very existence. Once at home in the boundless blue, the Bajao Laut now find themselves trapped in an invisible net, caught between a vanishing past and an uncertain future. Mochen. Along the emerald waters of the Andaman Sea, where limestone cliffs rise like ancient sentinels from the depths, the Mochen people drift with the grace of leaves on a stream. Known as the Sea Gypsies of Thailand and Myanmar, the Mochen do not simply live by the sea, they live within it, as if born from its tides and raised by its winds. Their world is fluid. Their home is not a place, but a presence. Carved wooden boats called kabang serve as floating hearths, sanctuaries, and cradles of tradition. Here, meals are cooked over tiny fires amid the open ocean. Children learn to paddle before they speak. And the sea, vast and ever-shifting, is both provider and teacher. The Mochen see the ocean not as a resource, but as a spirit. They listen to it. They interpret its moods like a priest reads sacred texts. And in return, the sea has given them gifts no modern invention can replicate. Mochen children, for instance, have trained their eyes to adjust underwater, allowing them to see with stunning clarity where others blur. It's a biological marvel born not from mutation, but from attention. And when catastrophe looms, they are the first to know. In 2004, when the Indian Ocean tsunami crashed into coastlines, satellite warnings failed to save thousands. But the Mochen, sensing the unnatural retreat of waves and the sudden stillness of birds, turned their boats inland and survived. Yet even this wisdom, so rare and vital, is fading. Governments push them to settle. Tourism reshapes their islands. Children are pulled from boats and placed in classrooms where ocean knowledge holds no grade. Slowly, the Mochen are being asked to forget the sea, to trade its boundless truth for the promise of dry land. But some truths, like the tide, refuse to be erased. Orurangl. In the narrow straits where continents nearly touch, where the waters of the Indian Ocean bleed into the South China Sea, the Orurangl have charted invisible paths for generations. These people of the sea are not wanderers by accident, but guardians by choice, protectors of channels that once pulsed with the lifeblood of ancient empires. Long before satellite maps or naval charts, the Orurangl knew every current, every reef, every shoal of the Strait of Malacca. Their memories were maps. Their songs were coordinates. Their boats small. Swift and silent were shadows of the sea, ferrying traders, warriors, and legends between the islands of Sumatra and the Malay Peninsula. But to call them mere navigators would miss the essence of who they are. The Orurangl live within the water's story. They speak to the sea as kin. Their ancestors are buried not beneath soil, but below waves. And in the calm of dusk, as the tide sways gently against their wooden hulls, they tell stories that can only be understood by those who have listened to water their whole lives. For centuries, they were feared and respected pirates to some, guides to others. Their allegiance shaped kingdoms. The rise of the ancient Malay Srivijaya Empire was built not just on gold, but on the loyalty of Orurangl seafarers who controlled the flow of trade like veins in a beating heart. But today, the strait that once gave them power has become a border. And borders, unlike currents, do not bend to memory. As maritime traffic grows and coastal development swallows their fishing grounds, the Orurangl find themselves stranded not at sea, but in history. Their stories grow quieter, their boats fewer, as they are pulled from the water into the grip of asphalt and bureaucracy. Yet in the hush of twilight, if you listen carefully beyond the hum of cargo ships, you may still hear them singing to the sea in a language older than the land. Tonka. Along the glittering coastlines of southern China, where high-rise cities now gleam like mirrors to the future, the Tonka people remain faint echoes of an ocean-bound past that refuses to disappear. Known historically as the Boat People, the Tonka lived not above the waves but among them, building lives on water when the land offered no welcome. For centuries, they were outcasts denied land rights, barred from marriage with land dwellers, labeled with slurs that placed them somewhere between human and myth. Yet in this rejection, the Tonka crafted resilience. They built floating villages, clusters of wooden sampans rocking side by side in harbors and estuaries where life blossomed in rhythm with the sea. In Guangdong, Hong Kong, and along the winding inlets of the Pearl River Delta, generations were raised by salt air and ore. Children learned to fish before they could read. Grandmothers cooked with seawater and sang lullabies to the tide. Weddings were performed on decks, funerals on rafts, and gods were honored in shrines that swayed with the current. To the Tonka, the sea was not exile, it was inheritance. But with the rise of modern China, the waves have receded not by nature's hand, but by design. Government programs relocated families to land-based housing. Floating homes were dismantled. Fishing zones were restricted, and a new tide of wealth, speed, and forgetting washed over the harbors where Tonka history once floated proudly. And yet, traces remain. In a grandmother's seafood stall on a Hong Kong backstreet, in a song hummed by an old fisherman as he mends a net he no longer needs, in the quiet ache of remembering a world where boats were not tools but entire lives. The Tonka may now walk on land, but their hearts still rock with the motion of the sea. Sukulout. Where the rivers of Sumatra spill into the sea, and the islands of the Riau archipelago scatter like pearls across shallow waters, the Sukulout make their home not on the islands themselves, but in the liminal space between. Estuaries, mangrove forests, and winding inlets form their world a shifting maze of brackish water and tidal breath. Their name, like their existence, is tied to water. Sukulout, tribe of the sea. But theirs is not a tale of conquest or escape, it is a quiet devotion. For generations, the Sukulout have lived in harmony with the estuarine tides, building stilt homes above the flood, navigating shallow channels with dugout canoes, and harvesting fish from waters that others see as margins. To live here is to live with patience. The sea brings, and the sea takes. And the Sukulout understand that balance is not found in dominion, but in listening. Their knowledge of the tides, of spawning grounds, of the migrations of shrimp and mollusks runs deeper than any textbook could record. It is felt through the soles of their feet, tasted in the saltiness of air, understood in the patterns of birds that fly low before a storm. But change, swift and unrelenting, now rises like a flood. Industrial ports swallow shorelines, overfishing drains the estuaries, plastics drift where fish once swam. And in the name of modernization, the Sukulout are offered concrete homes, electricity, and land titles as if identity could be replaced by infrastructure. Still, they resist forgetting. Some remain on their stilts, refusing the comfort of permanence. Because to them, home is not fixed, it is tidal. And no matter how high the water rises, they remember what the river taught them, that survival lies not in standing still, but in learning to move with grace. Bajjo. In the luminous waters east of Bali, where Komodo's cliffs rise and sea dragons roam, the Bajjo people move like the tide appearing, vanishing, returning. Their boats, called lepa, are more than vessels. They're floating worlds that carry memory, family, and freedom. The Bajjo don't just live near the sea, they live with it, inside it. Children dive before they walk. Elders read waves like scripture. They measure time in currents, not clocks, and trace their lineage through water, not land. Though often pressured to settle, to belong to flags or fences, they remain loyal only to the tide. Even as tourism carves new borders across Komodo's reefs and marine zones restrict ancient fishing grounds, the Bajjo endure not defiantly, but fluidly, adapting without yielding, moving without vanishing. They don't resist with monuments, they resist by continuing to float. Quietly, completely, unanchored, but not unrooted. Dwano. Where rivers kiss the sea along eastern Sumatra and western Malaysia, the Dwano people live in the space between among mangroves and estuaries, where maps blur and water speaks. Their stilted homes rise from brackish shallows. Their lives move with the tide. Children splash in muddy channels that outsiders avoid, but the Dwano read like stories, each bend a memory, each current a guide. Their world is built not from stone, but from rhythm. Fishing by moonlight, gathering shrimp at dawn, speaking in the soft grammar of weather. To them, this watery edge is sacred. But now, governments offer stillness in exchange for structure citizenship, land, roads. Mangroves are cut, estuaries filled. The Dwano are asked to step ashore, to forget. Yet many hold on, not to nostalgia, but to balance, to a truth learned where fresh and salt meet, that life is richest in between. Fujo Tanka. Along the Min River, where water snakes through the heart of Fujian, the Fujo Tanka lived for centuries as riverborne people unmoored from land, anchored in motion. Their sampans creaked with memory, their songs rose with the tide. Everything they knew was tied to the sea. For generations, they were outsiders, denied land, shunned from cities, called egg people. Yet they built a world from water. Their boats held gods and families, altars and nets. They read stars, wind, and bird flight as guides. They buried their dead in sacred offshore ground no road could reach. But rivers can be changed, and so can people if pushed hard enough. The Fujo Tanka were offered housing, education, belonging. But the cost was silence. Their floating homes vanished beneath the march of bridges and concrete. Still, by the river's edge, their spirit lingers in hands that mend nets, in boats that still rock in memory, in a language shaped by salt and rain. Because for them, water was not just where they lived, it was who they were. Macau Tanka. Beneath Macau's glittering skyline, where casinos hum and glass towers chase clouds, the Tanka once drifted through the harbors in wooden boats, unseen but essential. Long before fortunes rose from stone, these river people carved their lives from salt and tide, ferrying goods, harvesting oysters, and raising families on the water's back. Their floating homes rocked gently with the seasons. Children learned to walk on swaying decks. Rituals marked each moon, each catch, each loss. But to land dwellers, the Tanka were ghosts unwanted, unnamed, and unwelcome on dry ground. As Macau grew upward, the Tanka were offered land but asked to leave behind their tide-bound identity. Stilt villages vanished beneath development. Generations were pushed ashore, their stories drowned beneath concrete and neon. Yet fragments persist in weathered hands braiding nets, in sea chants murmured before dawn, in the soft slap of waves that still remember. Even in a city of chants, the Tanka endure less visible, but never gone. Orurang Sukulout. Among the glassy shallows and tangled mangroves of the Riau Islands, the Orurang Sukulout move with the tide, not the clock. Their lives are stitched into the seaboats drifting across mirrored water, villages rising gently on stilts, every task shaped by wind, moon, and fish. They inherit knowledge like breath passed from father to son, mother to daughter. Not in words, but in gestures. How to read the reef's mood, how to spot spawning grounds, how to speak to water without sound. To them, the sea is not owned, it is honored. But that reverence is tested. Modernity draws lines across their freedom. Marine parks, government ID cards, deals made in offices far from the mangroves. Some accept change, others hold the current. Either way, their rhythm remains a quiet, rooted resistance carried on every tide, reminding us that true belonging doesn't come from borders, but from knowing how to move through the world with grace. Tonka. Where the Pearl River splits and spills into delta and memory, the Tonka once thrived as masters of the waterway. Their sampans glided through misty channels, nets cast at dawn, songs rising with the tide. They lived not beside the river, but within it, floating between markets, monsoons, and generations. Their world was fluid, mobile, sacred. A wedding beneath the stars, a birth during flood season, an ancestor's spirit returning with the catch. But the river changed. Dams rose. Cities sprawled. Floating markets gave way to factories and freight. The Tonka were urged ashore not as neighbors, but as relics. Promises of modern housing came with the quiet price of stillness, yet not all was lost. In quiet corners of Guangzhou and Foshan, elders still speak the river's tongue. Their kitchens still smell of delta herbs. Their bodies still remember the rock of boats long gone. The water may be paved, but the current lives on, deep and unseen. Sukulout. Just beyond the roar of cargo ships and rising towers on Batam Island, the Sukulout continue to live as they have for generations, low to the water, high in reverence. Their boats drift through mangroves like dreams, their homes raised above the tide, their clocks set by the moon. They speak the language of wind. They fish not for profit, but for balance. The sea is not industry to them, it is ancestry. But Batam expands, and with it, the water narrows. High-rises replace tree lines. Ports push into sacred shallows. And slowly, the Sukulout are edged out not with force, but with forgetting. Still, they stay. Some in stilt homes shadowed by cranes, others inland with salt still in their blood. Because even as the world builds upward, they carry the ocean inside them, a steady rhythm no city can drown. Bajao, various subgroups. Across the maritime edges of Sabah, Palawan, and Sulawesi, the Bajau people exist not on land, but in rhythm with the sea. Spread over islands and borders, their many subgroups are united by a deep, unshakable bond with the water. Some, like the Baja Laut, are true nomads living entirely at sea, diving for fish with lungs that rival any mammals, navigating by memory alone. Others have built stilted homes in coastal shallows, living on land, but never far from the tides that shaped them. Their boats aren't just vessels, they're cradles of culture, carved with care, passed down through generations. Each sail catches not only the wind, but stories. Their children learn to swim before they can walk, and elders speak of the sea with the reverence others reserve for holy ground. Though governments offer land and modernization, the ocean keeps calling. And the Bajjo keep answering gracefully, enduringly, as if they were born from salt itself. Mochen, Surin Islands. In the jade-colored waters off Thailand's Andaman coast, the Mochen of the Surin Islands still live by the sea's soft breath. Their boats, carved by hand, are homes, temples, and lifelines floating worlds where silence means wisdom, and the sea speaks in signs. The Mochen believe the ocean is alive, that spirits ride its waves and fish appear when honored. They read the winds like scripture, and in times of danger, like the tsunami of 2004, they saw the signs no satellite could catch, because they listen and they remember. But even paradise is shrinking. Modern systems offer schools, cement, and citizenship, but often at the cost of belonging. Some Mochen stay, clinging to the tides. Others are pulled inland, their boats docked but their souls adrift. For those who remain, the sea is not escape, it is return. A sacred place, both home and guide, where memory floats just beneath the surface. Orurangl. Along Indonesia's quiet backwaters and scattered islets, the Orurangl still move with the tide drifting between mangroves and memory, never far from the sea that raised them. These people of the sea are cartographers of water, their lives mapped not by land, but by coral reefs, currents, and hidden channels. They fish with bamboo traps, sleep aboard boats rocked by stars, and treat mangrove forests like ancestral libraries alive with healing, stories, and sacred knowledge. Their wealth lies not in what they own, but in what they know. When the fish return, where the storms begin, how to find shelter in silence. But now, the world encroaches. Development pushes into the shallows. Sacred waters become tourist sites. Still, the Orurangl endure not by resisting force, but by refusing to forget. By floating forward with what the tide can still carry. Tobati. Where Utefa Bay cradles the coastline in calm, turquoise light, the Tobati people have lived for centuries, tethered to the rhythms of the reef. Their stilt villages stretch across the shallows, blending with mangroves and coral beds. Their days begin with the scent of salt and wood smoke, their nights with the hush of waves and prayer. The Tobati understand balance not just between land and sea, but between reverence and use. They fish with care, move with the seasons, and pass down dances that remember what words forget. Their traditions are etched into the water like tides on sand. But the city across the bay grows fast. Concrete moves closer, and with it comes noise, rules, and forgetting. Yet in their canoes, in their woven mats, in the quiet authority of their elders, the Tobati still remember that the sea does not belong to us, we belong to it. Sama Simunul. On the shores of Simunul Island, where the Sulu Sea glitters in the morning light, the Sama Simunul live at the meeting point of faith and tide. Their homes rise on stilts over shallow water. Mosques overlook coral shoals. And their boats, sleek, hand-carved, cut across the waves like prayers in motion. Islam reached them through the sea, and it stayed, blending seamlessly with their maritime way of life. Children learn the Quran beside the ocean. Elders recall the time when trade, religion, and storytelling all traveled by wind and sail. Now, the sea tightens. Fishing grounds fade. The modern world inches closer. But the Sama Simunul endure not out of resistance, but out of faith. In every tide they read the past, and in every prayer they steer toward the future. If their story moved you, let it drift further. Like this video to honor their resilience, comment with your thoughts or stories of coastal life, and share it with someone who needs to see the beauty we're in danger of losing. And don't forget to subscribe, so you never miss a journey to the edges of the known world.